The family meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on Sunday at what Dad called the Manor, a sprawling estate outside Willow Creek. Everyone was required to attend. My brother Gavin, my sister Leora, their spouses, their children, and me. Dad's assistant had sent an official email invitation with the subject line, "Family legacy discussion, mandatory attendance." That should have been my first warning. I arrived 15 minutes early, parking my midnight blue Taycan beside Gavin's monstrous Escalade. Through the front windows, I could already see movement. Dad pacing in his study, Mom arranging crystal glasses on the dining table like we were hosting a board of directors instead of family. I exhaled, tightened my ponytail, and stepped inside. Mom greeted me with her usual stage smile. "Cassia, you look so professional," she said, her eyes flicking over my tailored suit like it was an insult disguised as a compliment. "Still doing those computer things, right?" Those computer things happened to be my cybersecurity firm, the one I'd built from scratch, the one that brought in close to $1 million last year. But to them, I was still just the tech girl who didn't belong in their country club world. "Yeah," I said evenly, "still doing those." Gavin strolled in behind me, his Rolex glinting as he clapped Dad on the back. "Ready for the big announcement?" he said with that smug grin he'd perfected since high school. Leora entered last, carrying her toddler and wearing a designer dress I'd once seen on Mom's credit card statement. She kissed Dad's cheek, ignored me entirely, and settled into the velvet armchair closest to the fireplace, her self-appointed throne. Dad cleared his throat, waiting until the servants finished pouring wine before speaking. "Thank you all for coming," he began, hands clasped behind his back. "Your mother and I have spent months planning how to secure this family's future. The time has come to discuss succession and responsibility." My stomach tightened. That word, succession, never ended well. "As you know," he continued, "this estate, the beach villa, the vineyard, and the rental blocks downtown have all been under our care for decades. We want to ensure they serve the family's needs long after your mother and I are gone." Mom smiled softly, performing her usual role as the graceful matriarch. "It's time to pass the torch," she said. Gavin leaned forward. "Does this mean—" Dad nodded, pulling a folder from the table. "Gavin, you and Mira will take over the estate. You have children, you need the space, and your career in finance benefits from this address." Gavin pretended to be surprised, though his grin gave him away. "Leora," Dad went on, "you'll take the vineyard. Your husband's culinary brand could use the prestige. Hosting events there will elevate the family image." Leora's eyes shone. "Oh, that's perfect, Daddy." Then his gaze landed on me. "Cassia," he said, "your situation is different. You're independent, unmarried, mobile. You don't need a large property." I folded my hands in my lap, keeping my face neutral. "And where do I fit into this succession plan?" Mom stepped in quickly. "You'll move into the guest house here on the estate. It's charming and manageable, ideal for someone with your simple lifestyle. Simple lifestyle. The guest house, a 700-square-foot cottage behind the garage, used to belong to the gardener." "And my apartment downtown?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Leora will take that," Dad said matter-of-factly. "She needs a city base for her events." "It's just sitting empty most of the year, isn't it?" "Empty," I repeated quietly. "Right, except when I'm living in it." He ignored me. "Cassia," Mom said, placing her hand over mine like she was being kind, "you've always said material things don't matter to you. We're simply aligning assets to where they'll do the most good." Aligning assets. That was how my parents justified everything. Cruelty wrapped in corporate language. Gavin was already tapping on his phone, probably texting the housekeeper about redecorating his new estate. Leora was whispering excitedly to her husband about vineyard renovations. I sat still, heartbeat steady, expression unreadable. So, I said after a long silence, you've already decided. This isn't a discussion. Dad's lips tightened. We're your parents, Cassia. We know what's best for the family as a whole. Sometimes that requires individual sacrifice. I thought of the years I'd spent cleaning up their debts, paying off property taxes, bailing out Gavin's failed startups, covering Leora's unpaid rent, all quietly, without recognition. And now they were handing my home, my freedom, to the siblings who'd done nothing but take. But I didn't argue. I simply nodded, stood, and said, Understood. Mom blinked. Darling, you're not upset, are you? Not at all, I said smoothly. In fact, I think this meeting was long overdue. Dad exhaled with relief. Good. Then we can move forward as a united family. Absolutely, I said, already walking toward the door. I'll start preparing. They had no idea what I meant, because while they were dividing the family fortune, I'd been keeping something far more valuable, something that would change everything, something Mom prayed would never see the light of day. When I drove away from the manor that afternoon, my hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my chest burned, not from sadness. From clarity, my family had drawn the line. They'd stripped me of everything they thought mattered: property, prestige, place. But what they didn't know was that I already owned everything that could destroy them. I'd built my cybersecurity firm, Cynosure Systems, by finding digital skeletons people assumed were buried forever. Politicians, investors, philanthropists. I'd cleaned up their messes, secured their networks, erased their mistakes, including my parents. Years ago, when Dad's company had been investigated for financial fraud, I'd been the one who protected him. He'd begged me to fix it quietly. I had. I'd encrypted evidence of their offshore accounts, falsified audits, and secured the backup copies in a vault under my own name. Insurance for a day like this. And now that day had come. That night, I returned to my penthouse, my home for now. The city lights shimmered across the skyline like static. I poured a glass of red wine and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. One command unlocked years of family secrets. Family Archive Undisclosed Valmont Trust. There they were. Tax records, hidden transfers, luxury gifts masked as donations. All tied to the Valmont Family Trust, the name Dad used to conceal half their wealth offshore. My mother's signature was everywhere, but it wasn't just money. As I scanned deeper, I found emails, dozens of them, between Mom and a man named Julian Core. The name sent a jolt through me. He'd been our family lawyer for years. He'd also been the reason Mom spent extra hours at charity events. The emails weren't subtle. The others will never know, Julian. They think Gavin's the heir, but you and I know who really earned this. Once Cassia moves out, we'll have full access to the downtown property. We'll finalize the sale under the trust's name. There it was. Not only were they taking my apartment, they were planning to sell it behind my back and funnel the money through their shell accounts. I leaned back, exhaled, and smiled slowly. They thought I was the disgrace, the outlier, the problem child, but in less than a week, their empire would crumble. 2 days later, the family gathered again, this time for what Mom called a celebratory dinner. It wasn't optional. I arrived last, wearing a simple black dress and heels that clicked sharply against the marble floor. Everyone was already seated around the long mahogany table, Gavin with his smug grin, Leora fussing over her baby, Mom at the head like a queen. Cassia, Mom said sweetly, gesturing to an empty chair. We were just talking about how excited we are for this new chapter. It's so important for a family to support one another. I smiled faintly. Of course. Family first, right? Dad raised his glass. To unity and legacy, we toasted. I didn't drink. As the conversation drifted, mostly about renovations, new furniture, vacation homes, Mom finally turned her attention to me. So, Cassia, she said, voice light but sharp, how are you handling the transition? I know it's hard for you, not being in control for once. Gavin chuckled. Leora smirked. I set down my fork. Actually, I've been working on something exciting. Oh? Dad asked. Yes, I said. A new project. One that involves all of you, actually. Mom tilted her head. Really? Do tell. I took out my phone and placed it on the table. I've been going through old files, cleaning up the family's digital records, making sure everything is, transparent. Mom's smile froze. Cassia, what exactly do you mean? Oh, financial transparency, like the offshore accounts, the Valmont Trust, the fake property sales, those kinds of things. The room went still. Gavin's fork clattered. Leora blinked. Dad's jaw tightened. Cassia? He said slowly. This isn't funny. Who said I was joking? I replied, opening the files on my phone and turning the screen toward them. Emails, transfers, bank codes. Mom went pale. Where did you get that? I leaned forward. From you, Mom. I was the one who encrypted it all, remember? The same daughter you called a disgrace when you needed someone to cover your mistakes. Her face twisted. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said, my voice calm. You humiliated me. Tried to erase me from your little empire. But the thing about secrets, Mom, they don't stay buried forever. Gavin looked furious. Cassia, you can't just threaten us. I'm not threatening, I said, meeting his eyes. I'm informing. If you go through with taking my apartment, the media gets everything. Every file, every transfer, every message between Mom and Julian Core. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Enough, you wouldn't dare, I smiled. You're right. I wouldn't. But Forbes, the Herald, and the IRS might. Mom's voice cracked. Cassia, please. Think about what you're doing. I am, I said softly. For once I'm thinking about myself. I stood collecting my bag. Enjoy your dinner. And I left them sitting there, silent, terrified, and finally powerless. That night, my phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from Mom, Dad, even Leora. I didn't answer. Instead, I drafted an email. Subject, Family Trust, Immediate Disclosure. To Julian Core, Attorney at Law. Effective immediately. I am withdrawing authorization for any transactions under the Valmont Family Trust. All accounts linked to my name will be frozen pending investigation. Then I clicked Send. The next morning, my family's financial world began to unravel. By the time I woke up Monday morning, the storm had already begun. The first thing I saw was the blinking red light on my phone. 32 missed calls, 12 new voicemails, and over 50 unread messages. The second thing was the headline flashing on my news feed. Valmont Holdings under investigation for offshore tax evasion. Insiders claim fraudulent transfers through a private family trust. I didn't need to read further. I knew exactly which insider had triggered it. The moment I'd sent that email to Julian, the dominoes began to fall. Banks reported suspicious activity. Auditors reopened files. Journalists started connecting the dots. I hadn't leaked anything yet. I didn't need to. The threat alone had been enough to light the fuse. My parents' empire was collapsing, and I hadn't even touched the detonator. Around noon, I got the call I'd been expecting. Cassia. Dad's voice was hoarse, strained, stripped of his usual authority. We need to talk, now. I sipped my coffee, glancing out at the skyline from my penthouse. About what? You know damn well what. The press is crawling all over the estate. Investigators have frozen our accounts. You've done enough damage. Damage, I said calmly. That's an interesting word for justice. Justice? He growled. You've humiliated this family. I smiled faintly. You humiliated me first, remember? The disgrace speech at dinner? Or when you handed my property to Leora like it was a birthday gift? He exhaled sharply. Listen, we can fix this. Just take down whatever you've sent. Delete it all. I didn't send anything, I said truthfully, yet a pause. Then, what do you want, Cassia, finally? The question I'd waited to hear all my life. By afternoon, the Valmont family name was trending everywhere. Reporters camped outside the estate gates. Gavin's clients pulled out of his firm. Leora's husband lost his sponsors overnight. And Mom? She went silent. That told me everything. When she finally called that evening, her voice trembled. Cassia, please. Can we meet? Where? Here, at the estate. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to hang up. Another part, the part still craving closure, said yes. The drive up to Willow Creek felt different this time. No staff in the driveway, no polished smiles. Just chaos. Reporters yelling questions. Cameras flashing. Mom was waiting in the front hall, dressed in one of her expensive silk blouses, but her mascara had streaked. Cassia, she said, reaching for me. Thank God you came. I stepped back. You wanted to talk? She nodded quickly, glancing toward the study. Come inside, please. Dad was there too, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Papers littered his desk, subpoenas, notices, frozen account statements. He didn't look up. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, I said evenly. I've ended the game you both created. Mom's voice cracked. We were protecting the family. By hiding millions in offshore accounts? By planning to sell my home behind my back? It wasn't personal, she said. You've always been so distant, Cassia. You never needed us, I laughed softly. You're right. I didn't. But you needed me when the IRS came knocking last time, didn't you? She flinched. I stepped closer. You built this image of perfection, Mom. Charity galas, family portraits, Sunday brunches, while burying your crimes under fake smiles. You called me a disgrace because I didn't play your game. Her eyes filled with tears. Cassia, please. If this goes public, we'll lose everything. You already have, I said. She dropped to the sofa, covering her face. What do you want from us? For the first time, I let the silence stretch. Then I said, the truth. Dad looked up, confused. What truth? The real reason you called me a disgrace. They exchanged glances, that tiny, telling flicker of panic. Tell me, I said quietly. Or I'll let the investigators find out for themselves. Mom's hands trembled. Cassia, please, not here. Now, I snapped. The room went cold. Finally, she whispered, because you weren't supposed to exist. I froze. What? Dad rubbed his temples. Your mother? She made a mistake years ago. Before Gavin was born, Mom's voice cracked. I had an affair. With Julian Core. I stared at her, the words hanging like smoke in the air. You mean the man you were emailing last month? She flinched. It ended long ago. Your father agreed to raise you as his own, for the family's reputation. But when you started asking questions, when you built that company, when you became too independent, you became a threat. If the truth came out, everything we built would crumble. I laughed once, sharp, disbelieving. So you called me a disgrace because you were ashamed of your own secret. Tears slid down her cheeks. Cassia, I'm sorry. I was protecting you. No, I said softly. You were protecting yourself. I stood there for a long moment, watching the two people who'd raised me, the perfect couple who'd lied about everything, even my existence. Then I picked up a manila folder from the desk, the one labeled Property Transfer, Cassia Valmont Penthouse. I tore it clean in half. This is over, I said. You don't control me anymore. Mom looked up, broken. What will you do? Exactly what you thought I never would, I said. Tell the truth. That night, I uploaded the files. Every document, every record, every message, not to the media, but to the authorities directly. I didn't need public revenge. I wanted accountability. Within 24 hours, investigations turned into indictments. My parents' assets were seized. Their mansion, the family estate, was locked under federal audit. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. But freedom, I was learning, came with silence and the weight of finally knowing the truth about where I came from. 3 weeks after I walked out of that mansion, the Valmont empire was dust. Federal agents had raided the estate. My parents were under indictment for fraud and obstruction. Leora's social media empire vanished overnight, and the perfect family that used to grace charity magazines now lived off-grid, in a rented farmhouse under investigation. Watched it all unfold from the glass balcony of my penthouse, the one they'd tried to steal from me. The news anchors said words like money laundering and shell companies. They didn't say my name. I'd made sure of that. The digital trail led only to their decisions, not mine. I wasn't interested in fame, only in truth. Still, I wasn't celebrating. The thing about revenge? It's quieter than people imagine. It doesn't roar. It exhales. I didn't cut them off completely. Every week I sent a transfer, not to bail them out, but to cover their attorney fees directly through my legal firm. I wanted no thank yous, no emotional appeals, just receipts. Even justice needs paperwork. Julian Kaur tried calling twice. The man whose name I now knew to be my biological father. I never picked up. Instead, I listened to one of his voicemails. Cassia, I never meant for you to find out this way. Your mother loved you. Maybe, but love wrapped in lies isn't love. It's control-wearing perfume. One evening, as I was reviewing contracts for a new cybersecurity client, I got an unexpected email. Subject: RE, Family Restoration Fund. From Tyler Green, Investigative Journal, Cassia. Your parents' charity foundation is being liquidated. The remaining $2.3 million can either be absorbed by the state or reassigned to a verified nonprofit. Since you exposed the fraud, you have the right to direct its closure. How would you like to proceed? I stared at the screen. The Valmont Foundation, the same organization that had laundered money through fake community programs. A fund built on deception. I replied, transfer all remaining assets to Project Haven, a women's tech education initiative for foster youth. Anonymous donation. No publicity. If there was going to be a legacy attached to my name, it would be one that repaired what theirs had broken. 2 months later, I visited Project Haven for the first time. Rows of girls sat in a converted warehouse, learning code, building prototypes, laughing without fear of judgment. Their director, a kind woman named Tessa, showed me around. These computers were donated anonymously, she said, gesturing to a row of brand new laptops. Whoever did it changed everything for these kids. I smiled. Then maybe they're not a disgrace after all. Meanwhile, the Valmont trials dragged on. My father tried to claim ignorance. My mother pleaded for leniency. The court wasn't merciless. They avoided prison time but were stripped of all assets and banned from operating any financial entities. The house, the cars, the paintings, all gone. Leora avoided charges by cooperating, but her marriage collapsed, her followers vanished, and she ended up taking a marketing job in another state. For the first time, each of them had to work, earn, live without illusion. One evening, I got a letter, handwritten. No return address, but the cursive was unmistakable, my mother's. Cassia, I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope one day you'll remember the good before the bad, the nights I read to you, the birthdays we celebrated, the way I braided your hair before school. I know I hurt you more deeply than anyone should ever hurt their child. I was terrified of losing control, of losing face, of losing you. But now that I've lost everything else, I see that control was never love. It was fear. If you ever want to talk, you know where to find me. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not to cherish it. To remind myself that closure doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it comes from silence. A year passed. My company tripled in size. I opened offices in London and Singapore. Forbes called me the quiet powerhouse who dismantled an empire. They didn't know the half of it. I still drove by the old estate sometimes, now a government training facility. Its lawns unkept, the marble steps cracked. It didn't hurt anymore. It just looked small. On the anniversary of that family meeting, the day my mother called me a disgrace, I returned to Willow Creek alone. The gates were chained, but I parked outside and stood by the fence. The sunset was the same as always, burning gold through the trees. I whispered, not to them, but to the girl I used to be. You weren't a disgrace. You were the truth they couldn't handle, and for the first time that felt enough. That night, I threw a small dinner party at my penthouse. Just 6 people, my business partners, a few close friends, and Tessa from Project Haven. No champagne towers, no photographers. Tessa raised her glass. To Cassia, proof that revenge can be righteous if it builds something better in its wake. Laughter filled the room, and I felt something warm, not triumph but peace. I'd spent years building walls. Now I was building bridges instead. Later, after everyone left, I stood alone on the balcony. Below me, the city glowed, billions of lights, each one a story. I thought of my parents somewhere far away, learning how to live quietly. I thought of the girls in Project Haven typing their first lines of code. And I thought of the moment Mom had called me a disgrace, how those words meant to destroy me had become the spark that set me free. 6 months later, I received an anonymous package. Inside was a small silver pendant, the same one my mother used to wear at every gala. No note, just a folded receipt from a pawn shop and one sentence scribbled on the back. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to see what matters. I smiled. Then I slipped the pendant into my pocket and walked back to work, to the empire I'd built myself, the one no one could ever take away again. Because in the end, the best revenge wasn't the downfall of my family. It was the rise of the woman they once called a disgrace,